The tiny constellation of Sagitta is one of the smallest in the sky, yet it hides great mysteries. Ancient myths say that with this very arrow, mighty Hercules killed the eagle and saved the chained Prometheus. But today, this ancient weapon of the gods has become a symbol of peace and connection with other civilizations. It is to its star that humanity sent a radio message, which will reach alien worlds later this century.
Good morning. Today we are going to conduct a deep analysis of a specific, and I think you'll find fascinating region of the night sky, the constellation Sagitta, the arrow. Our inquiry will cover its astrometric profile, the key astrophysical objects within its boundaries, and its surprisingly resonant place in human history. So, let's begin. And right away, we are confronted with what I call the Sagitta paradox. You see, in terms of sheer celestial real estate, it is almost negligible. It ranks 86th out of the 88 modern constellations, making it the third smallest. And yet, its historical significance is immense. It's one of the original 48 constellations meticulously cataloged by Ptolemy back in the 2nd century. This sharp dichotomy, this tension between its tiny physical footprint and its enormous historical weight, is really the central theme of our discussion today. So first things first, we'll begin with the astrometry, the precise measurement of where Sagitta is and what its basic parameters are. We need to define its place in the cosmos before we can understand what's inside it. To be precise, the constellation occupies an area of 79.9 square degrees on the celestial sphere. It's a tiny patch of sky, confirming its status as one of the smallest constellations we recognize. Now, you might think such a small area wouldn't offer much to see, but that's not quite right. Within these formal boundaries, there are approximately 28 stars that are visible to the unaided human eye. In technical terms, their apparent magnitude is brighter than 6.0, which is the classical limit for naked eye observation under good conditions. What's really remarkable about Sagitta, though, is its incredible visibility. Because it's located near the celestial equator, it can be seen from the North Pole all the way down to 70 degrees south latitude. This means it's accessible to observers on nearly every continent on Earth. For the absolute best view, you'll want to look for it during July and August when it culminates. That is, it reaches its highest point in the sky around midnight. So how do you find it? Well, your guidepost is one of the most famous asterisms in the sky, the Summer Triangle. You locate those 3 brilliant stars, Vega, Deneb, and Altair. Sagitta is nestled right inside that triangle, just to the north of the constellation Aquila, the Eagle. It really does look like a small, faint arrow in flight against the backdrop of the Milky Way. All right, now we move from mapping to physics. We're going to treat the constellation as a kind of astrophysical laboratory. The stellar objects within its borders serve as absolutely crucial case studies for understanding stellar evolution and high-energy astrophysics. The brightest star here is Alpha Sagittae, which has the proper name, Sham. That name is a direct clue. It comes from the Arabic word for arrow, Sam. Physically, it's what we call a yellow bright giant, spectral class G0II. This tells us it's a star that has exhausted the hydrogen in its core and has evolved off the main sequence. It's a massive object, about 4 times the mass of our sun, and it blazes with a light of 340 suns. But for my money, one of the most significant stars here is 15 Sagittae. Now, this one is a G1V spectral class yellow dwarf. Our sun is a G2V. This makes 15 Sagittae a remarkably close solar analog. It's incredibly similar to our own star in mass, temperature, and luminosity. And it is precisely this similarity that made it the target of a very important modern project. On June 30th, 1999, scientists at the Yevpatoria Deep Space Center aimed their radio telescope at this star and sent a powerful, structured message called Cosmic Call 1. This was an active MADI project, messaging to extraterrestrial intelligence. Right now, as we speak, that signal is traveling through the interstellar medium. It is on its way and it is scheduled to arrive at the 15 Sagittae system in the year 2057. Now let's turn to one of the most violent and dynamic objects in the constellation, WZ Sagittae. This is a cataclysmic variable star, a system known as a dwarf nova. What you have to picture is a very close binary system. On one side, you have a white dwarf, the incredibly dense, dead core of a sun-like star. And orbiting it, very tightly, is a much lower mass companion star. And the physics of what happens next is just fascinating. The white dwarf's immense gravity literally siphons material, mostly hydrogen, off of its companion.
This gas doesn't fall straight on. Instead, it forms a flat, rotating structure called an accretion disk. Imagine water swirling down a drain. For decades, this disk builds up more and more material, getting denser and hotter until it hits a critical threshold. At that point, a runaway thermonuclear fusion reaction ignites across the surface of the disk. The result is a massive explosion, a nova, that causes the system to brighten by a factor of 1,000. And this is a recurring cycle. We've seen it happen in 1913, 1946, 1978, and most recently in 2001. Another object of great interest in Sagitta is Messier 71. And for a very long time, this object was a genuine puzzle for astronomers. It was difficult to classify. Was it an unusually dense and compact open cluster of young stars? Or was it an exceptionally sparse and metal-rich globular cluster of ancient stars? The data was ambiguous. Well, today, thanks to modern photometry and spectroscopy, that debate is settled. The verdict is in. M71 is, in fact, a globular cluster. We now know it's a very ancient collection of stars. It's just more loosely structured than a typical globular, and it has a high metallicity, which, remember, in astronomy simply means it has a high abundance of elements heavier than hydrogen and helium. It sits about 13,000 light-years from us. Okay, so we have now examined the astrometry and the astrophysics. Let's pivot from the hard sciences to the humanities, because the cultural and mythological legacy of this tiny constellation is just as significant as its stellar components. And what's absolutely remarkable is the sheer consistency of its identity across cultures. The ancient Greeks called it Oistos. The Romans translated this directly into Latin as Sagitta. In the 2nd century, Ptolemy cemented that name in his great work, the Almagest, and centuries later, Arab astronomers called it Al-Saham. In every single case, across thousands of years and multiple civilizations, the name means one thing: the era. One of the primary myths tied to Sagittaria involves the god Apollo. The story goes that the monstrous serpent Python had tormented his mother, Leto. To gain his revenge, Apollo hunted the beast to its lair on Mount Parnassus, and with a single, perfectly aimed golden arrow, he slew the monster. He then placed that arrow in the heavens as a permanent symbol of the triumph of light over darkness, of order over chaos. But perhaps the most profound myth is that of the liberation of Prometheus. The Titan, as you know, was punished for giving fire to humankind. He was chained to a rock where an eagle, represented by the nearby constellation Aquila, would come each day to devour his liver. The hero Heracles, passing by and seeing this horrific, endless torture, took pity. He drew his bow and fired an arrow that struck and killed the eagle, finally freeing Prometheus. In this telling, the arrow is not a weapon of vengeance. It is an instrument of compassion, an agent of freedom. There is a third, more poetic interpretation as well. Some myths identify the arrow as belonging to Eros, or Cupid. This version connects Sagitta not with conflict or liberation, but with love. And it makes a certain narrative sense, given its proximity to constellations like Cygnus, the swan, and Aquila, the eagle, both of whom were figures in various divine love stories. So for our final section, we're going to synthesize these threads. We'll bridge the ancient mythological meaning with the practicalities of modern observation and consider the constellation's new, emergent significance here in the 21st century. So if you are a practical observer and you want to see this for yourself, it's quite simple. First, locate the summer triangle. Then look just north of the bright star Altair, and you will find it. A standard pair of binoculars is all you need to resolve Messier 71. It will look like a faint, fuzzy, grainy patch of light. And if you have a moderate-sized telescope, you can hunt for a more challenging but beautiful target, the Necklace Nebula, a planetary nebula that looks like a string of glowing pearls in space. And this brings us to our final and, I believe, most powerful thought. Consider this transformation. Sagittarius, an object that for millennia symbolized conflict, vengeance, and divine power, has been fundamentally redefined in our time. It is no longer just an ancient weapon immortalized in the stars. Today, it is the destination for one of humanity's first deliberate messages to another star system. It has become a beacon for peaceful interstellar communication, turning a timeless symbol of war into a modern emblem of hope.
Thank you, friends. Strive for understanding and become wiser. See you soon.